Hi, my name's Michael DiGirolamo.
And I'm B. Schaefer.
Welcome to our crash course created for Dr. Janice Fahrenheimer's Word 112 Writing Jewish Kentucky course, specializing in a fascinating topic that few would ever think of: intergenerational differences in the Jewish American community, both in and out of Kentucky.
I bet some of our listeners didn't even know that Kentucky had a Jewish community.
Yeah, it does. According to the Jewish Virtual Library, throughout the Commonwealth there are over 11,000 Jewish people as of 2015. I know it doesn't sound like much, but the Jewish community here has a history that spans hundreds of years.
Wow.
I know, right?
So, maybe we should provide an overview of Judaism. I feel like I know what it is, but I don't know everything I should about it.
Of course. Let's talk with Jacob. He's become a bit of a Judaism expert.
Judaism is a monotheistic faith which originated in the ancient region of Canaan, located in what is now modern-day Israel and Palestine. Worldwide, there are over 14 million Jews, most of whom live in either the United States or Israel. A mere 0.08% of the global Jewish population, or 11,000 Jews, currently live in Kentucky, most of Eastern European origin. Also known as the Ashkenazi, these individuals comprise of about 80% of all Jewish people, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. Judaism is divided into three main denominations: Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform Judaism. Orthodox Judaism is generally the most conservative major denomination, staying true to traditional Jewish law and religious norms. Reform Judaism is most liberal denomination, emphasizing the evolving nature of the faith to conform with the times. Conservative Judaism is a sort of medium between the two, respecting traditional Jewish law while being open to change if need be. In other words, Reform Judaism has changed the most in terms of ritual observance and traditions, while Orthodox Judaism stays closest to the form of Judaism practiced thousands of years ago.
Wow, that's very interesting.
It definitely is. Could you tell us a bit more about Judaism here in Kentucky?
Of course. According to Leishai Weisbach, the Jewish population is almost exclusively found in Lexington and Louisville, although tiny communities exist in Owensboro and Paducah. Historically, Jewish communities were found all over the state. The Jewish Virtual Library tells us that the population was at its height in the early 20th century, but the rural Jewish community has since been in decline. However, Lexington and Louisville continue to host significant communities. While Louisville's community is in decline, Lexington's continues to thrive, though its demographics are quite the same. Many members of the community, such as Rabbi Moshe Smolkin and Dr. Raphael Finkel, say that these communities generally have much more older people attending services than younger people. Dr. Finkel in particular says,
Yeah, as I mentioned, the older ones are more likely to be coming to services, but even that's been dwindling. It used to be that 4 times a year, when there's a special service called Yizkar, which is a memorial service for relatives who've died, everyone would be there. You don't miss a Yizkar. But now it doesn't draw people anymore, even the older people. So something is no longer speaking to them there. But it is more the older generation that does come to services.
these communities are slowly changing as more Jews from out of state move to Kentucky, particularly to the city of Lexington, which is home to 2 synagogues, each with more than 100 years of history: Ohavei Zion, a conservative synagogue, and Beth Israel, a reform synagogue.
Whoa. So, if most Jews in Kentucky have similar backgrounds, how does this factor into Jewish life in the state?
Well, B, let's look at an example in Lexington. As the rabbi of the conservative Ohavei Zion Synagogue, Rabbi Moshe Smolkin has given us a very professional and detailed description of the situation in his own congregation to help us understand what Jewish life is like. According to Smolkin, his congregation has some major divides on the basis of age. The younger generation has different ideals than the older, often more traditional generation, and tend to associate with people their own age. This can be the result of the congregants simply feeling more comfortable with their own generation, or it could be they prefer to associate with people who share their political and theological beliefs. Of course, his synagogue is trying to bridge this age gap.
What I really wanted to do was show there are multiple perspectives there, right? And that's often in my teaching, I try and there's this view and then there's this view, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that goes into the type of rabbi that I am also with. There's Hillel and there's Shammai. There's these different Jewish perspectives on the issues.
Wow. So, What would you say is the most divisive issue in his congregation?
Israel, without a doubt. Though this is a major generalization, older members are often much more pro-Israel than younger generations. This isn't unique to Smolkin's congregation either. According to a study by the Pew Research Center in 2013, 79% of Jews aged 65 and older say they felt personally attached to Israel, but only 60% of those aged 18 to 29 felt the same way. Over 3/4 of those over age 65 said Israel's destruction would be a personal tragedy to them, but less than half of those under the age of 35 said the same.
Okay, so it seems there's a huge disparity between younger and older people in the Jewish community, both in Kentucky and out of it. I'm glad to hear Rabbi Smolkin is working to bridge this divide.
Smolkin's congregation is conservative. How do its intergenerational differences compare to interdenominational differences?
I can answer that.
Hey, Abigail, what do you know about this topic?
More than Jacob does. The denominational divide, unlike the generational divide, is not so clearly cut. In Judaism, the divide occurs between those who choose to uphold traditional Jewish beliefs and values, Orthodox Jews, and those who are modernizing their beliefs, Reformed Jews. The respective denomination one belongs to is often affected by the way they were raised. This is emphasized in the book Families and Faith, How Religion is Passed Down Across Generations. Author and religion and spirituality researcher Vern L. Bankston explains how the upbringing by one's parents and the pressure both they and their immediate community places on the children regarding religion can determine how religious one will become, and what denomination may result because of that. In addition to how they were brought up, one of the largest deciding factors when determining one's place in a congregation is political views. As evidenced by trends with Smolkin Synagogue, political views are the main link between generational and denominational divides. While a congregant's age may be a factor in determining what denomination they identify as, that identity will mainly be defined by their political views. Political views do vary per individual, but the younger generation as a whole tends to be more left-leaning, particularly in the civil rights end of the spectrum. Rabbi Smolkin confirmed as much in his interview. When asked about bringing up social issues in the synagogue, he responded,
And again, for the younger generation, it's a non-issue. So when I broached the topic in terms of the congregation, I've never gotten pushback from the younger generation. I certainly have from some of the folks in the older generation, but not so much, because it tends still to be, generally in the United States, the Jewish community tends to be fairly liberal.
In conclusion, the older generation's more conservative thinking versus the younger generation's more modern thinking adds to the intergenerational split, making it even more obvious.
That's certainly quite a lot to take in. Thanks, Abigail.
Sorry, guys, but I still have a few more questions. Particularly, due to this divide, how do you think younger generations are changing in regards to their religious practices?
That's a great question, B. According to the 2014 Religious Landscape Study, if we look at the population of the United States as a whole, starting in the year 2007 to 2014, the percentage of Americans who say they are absolutely certain God exists has sharply dropped from 71% to 63%. However, keep in mind that this data accounts for U.S. citizens across all religious affiliations, or lack thereof.
Wow, that's quite a drop. But how is this reflected in the nation's Jewish population as a whole?
The Jewish population that was surveyed for this study reported that in 2007, 83% did believe in God's existence. In 2014, this number dropped to 79%, a 4% decrease, which is only half that of the decline of the general population of the United States.
That reminds me, UK student Alex Rosenswag says that while neither are as faith-oriented as his grandparents, he finds himself to be more committed to his faith than his parents.
My parents, I would probably say I'm a little bit more religious than them, and that has a lot to do with my grandmothers just because of their backgrounds both being more religious than not. And I guess in the modern world, a lot of people start to stray away from being more of a conservative Jew rather than a Reformed Jew or an Orthodox Jew, just because there's two different extremes, I guess.
Why do you think the U.S. Jewish population seems to resist the decline in faith reflected by the general population of the U.S.?
Now that's a more complex question, and it can't be answered by mere numbers. According to Rabbi Dr. Rachel Sabbath Bai Halakmi.
Rabbi Dr. who?
Rabbi Dr. Rachel Sabbath Bai Halakmi. She is currently the President Scholar and National Director of Recruitment and Admissions for Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati. Her other accomplishments include co-authoring 2 books and being the writer of several published articles, including Radically Free and Radically Claimed in Jewish Theology in Our Time.
Wow, that's impressive.
It certainly is. And even through all that, Rabbi Sabbath still finds time to travel across North America giving lectures on leadership, Israel, gender, and theology. Recently, on November 2nd, she came to Lexington's local Temple Adath Israel Synagogue, while on the Moonsnick Lecture Series, to give a lecture on the growing cultural divide between generations in the U.S. I was lucky enough to attend this lecture and ask her the same question you just asked me regarding the country's Jewish population and how they reflected this national decline in faith.
Awesome. What did she say?
Well, her response pointed to something as simple as family dinners. Dinner as a family is something that seems to be increasingly rare in today's busy modern world. Sabbath explained through a personal anecdote detailing the time that her daughter had a friend over during dinner. The friend remarked how nice the evening was and that her family never eats dinner together. Many Jewish holidays are centered around the idea of a family dinner, like Shabbat dinner, a weekly meal commemorating the day that God rested from creating the world. It forbids doing activities related to work and encourages spending time with family. This emphasis on the importance of tradition within Jewish households could be part of the reason why there's a slower decline in faith in the Jewish community over the past 7 years than in other populations. Dinner table talk helps preserve intergenerational communications, and Rabbi Sabbath expressed many times throughout her lecture that conversation between generations is a key element to the cultural development of our society.
So something as simple as parents talking to their kids at dinner can help preserve faith?
Well, not exactly. Sabbath discussed how today's youth referring to the young members of all mainstream faiths in the U.S., are becoming less and less involved in the activities of religious institutions. She explained we are not just at danger of losing faith in younger generations, but also, by having less involved youth, there is less interaction between the young and old members of our communities. Not only could this lack of interaction contribute to the decline in faith in younger generations, but also in the ignorance and misunderstanding between members of all different generations.
Oh no, that's terrible.
It's not all bad, however. Dr. Raphael Finkel, a computer scientist at the University of Kentucky, described Yiddishvach, an intergenerational camp held yearly to promote learning of the Yiddish language in Jewish American communities. It's popular amongst all age groups and helps bridge the large gap between them.
So even as an adult, he has been coming to Yiddishvach. Yiddishvach, I mentioned 150 people getting together of all ages, from babes in arms to doddering oldsters and everything in between. Yeah. So it's a big community of many ages.
Sounds awesome.
Definitely. However, Sabbath had a few more points to make. She also discussed how the increased reliance on technology in the youngest generation, Gen Z, is accelerating this decline in discussions between generations.
How does technology lead to less intergenerational communication with so many popular apps and websites designed primarily for interaction?
It does make us more connected. However, with the constant availability of technology to fulfill our social needs, we are becoming less social in the real world. During the Urgency of Leadership lecture, Sabbath discussed a study showing that the younger generations of our modern nation, the Gen Z population, is showing less of an ability to pick up on facial cues than the generations before them. This is attributed to the increase in screen time among youth and decline in time spent interacting with others in the real world. Being involved in religious institutions and observing certain traditions help younger generations to interact and connect with their older community members and family. This interaction is important for a healthy sharing of ideas between generations.
And that's why those family dinners could be so important to the preservation of faith in the Jewish community.
Precisely.
Kentucky native Elizabeth Crane perfectly encapsulates this effort towards intergenerational dialogue. Though she describes her Judaism as more of a cultural connection, she plans to raise her daughter in a more faith-oriented manner because
I want to be able to pass that on to her. I don't want her to lose out on a culture, and that's the biggest problem I think in with my generation and in this culture is that we're losing some of the big principles that our grandparents and great-grandparents brought back with us. And that's a bummer, and I don't want her to miss out because I think it's so neat.
So, now that we've made it this far and you've got all this brand new information, you're probably all wondering the same thing. So what? In order to answer that question, we're going to throw it back to the beginning of the semester.
Ah, yes. A time in our lives when stress levels were low and there were no final projects looming over our heads. But wait, what does that have to do with Jewish Kentucky?
Well, Michael, remember all of those syllabi that you received in your classes? At the very end of each one of those, in very fine print, there was a statement. Do you remember what it said?
Something about plagiarism?
Close, but no. At the end of a syllabus, there's usually a statement from the Office of Institutional Diversity, which informs you of ways to report incidents of bias or violence. Even though most students usually skip over this part to find out whether or not attendance for the class is mandatory, it's really important information.
You're absolutely right. Here at the University of Kentucky, one of our 4 core pillars is belonging and engagement. Basically, that means that it's crucial to our school that everyone feels as though they have a home here. And that means it's also really important to focus on inclusion, especially of minority groups.
One of the best ways to promote inclusion is through education, and that doesn't have to mean taking a class about Jewish Kentucky or African American literature. It can be simple things, like asking someone to share knowledge about their heritage or their faith, and asking meaningful questions to better your understanding.
Helping to promote inclusion on campus will benefit you in countless ways. Not only will it help you make new friends and learn new things, but it can also help you become a better global citizen. The more you know, the wider your worldview becomes, and the better you can understand and participate in the world around you. It's powerful stuff.
So, thanks for listening. We hope you learned something today and that we maybe even inspired you to get out there and learn even more about all the amazing human beings around you.
We'll catch you next time on Crash Course Word 112.
We'd like to thank the following people in the production of this piece. First, thanks goes to Dr. Fernheimer for assigning and guiding us through this project, the Media Depot at the University of Kentucky for technology to record, the Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History for the interviews used throughout this project, and all the people who were interviewed for the process. Also, we'd like to thank the Special Collections Library on campus for additional resources. Another thanks goes to the voice actors, editors, and scriptwriters who worked on this project vigorously to make it as good as it was. Thank you.